Hey y'all, what is up? Keasbey here. So, today we're going to be talking about how to out some of the more commonly played counter-floodgates to the birds we all know and love on this channel, Floowandereeze. But before we get into it, don't forget to drop this video a like and subscribe to the channel to help spread the word of the bird. Alright, so I want to preface this video with the fact that these are more corner case type last resorts to get out of a losing situation and hopefully recover. However, while these lines all 100% work and you should know them, the best move for outing these is siding and back removal. But knowing these other outs can help you in a game 1 or 2 or 3 if you don't draw the easy outs. So let's get right into it. The first and most commonly played counter-floodgate type card we're getting hit with is Zombie World. So Zombie World is pretty devastating for a few reasons. First is the ease of access to it via Necroworld Banshee. And because Banshee is a quick effect, we can't even snipe it at a grave with Called by or DD Crow. Second, the actual effect. Not only does it prevent our little birds from returning home due to everyone turning into a zombie on field, but more importantly, it cuts us off of tribute summoning. So a very important distinction I mentioned in my rulings video about unexplored winds, while winds doesn't actually tribute monsters, it still treats summons it enables as tribute summons, hence everything mentioned about how Ryza interacts with it, which means we can't send Zombie World away with winds. But we do have a huge tool that most other players forget we have, the extra deck. Okay, so we actually have 3 options that I like for outing Zombie World, and I'll go through them in order of ease to do. For the first line, we require access to our field spell and 2 level 1 monsters, at least one of them being a Floowandereeze. This is going to be a standard across all of these. So what we do is activate the field spell, then use its effect. Normal summon out our Floowandereeze monster, but do not activate its effect. Our banished birds won't trigger under Zombie World, so no worries there. Next, what we do is use our game mechanic normal summon for the second level 1 monster. Remember, the summon from the effective map doesn't count towards that. Now, we haven't used anything that would prevent us from special summoning. Map's effect doesn't have any lock on that, only the level 1 Floowandereeze do. Now let's overlay for Lyrilisc Assembled Nightingale. So I'm sure you see where this is going. Poking twice for some damage, then overlay a Downer Musician. If you'd like, just keep in mind that this would be summon number 4 if Nibiru is a concern of yours. Then we're going to overlay into Divine Arsenal Double Isaias. And with that, we now have an out to Zombie World. Keep in mind the small birds we detach will go to grave and we will lose our field spell in the process, but this will let us crack back and just, hopefully take control of the game. You can also take on a Geomathmech Final Sigma this way, which is another card that is remarkably difficult for us to out. So I just want to again restate, these are not normal Floowander plays. However, they are plays you need to know because sometimes our worst and weirdest options are our only options, and hey, Zaius is kind of a house. Okay, let's talk about another solution with a similar setup. This will clear the Zombie World, but allows us to potentially play on our opponent's turn afterwards. This setup requires everything the previous one did, but also adds in us having a third bird, preferably Rabina or Eaglin, and even more optimally, a hard-opened Dreaming Town. Again, it's a lot, and it's fairly specific, but being able to recognize that you have this will help you in niche cases or recognize situations where you have it late in the game. So we do everything the same way, but this time we're going to make Lyrilisc Promenade Thrush. Promenade Thrush allows you to detach material to shuffle back a spell trap into the deck. So we do the same line, but instead we overlay into her, and then you can proceed to set the hard open Dreaming Town and play out a turn on your opponent's turn with the third bird you have in hand. And we can actually even turn her into a Zeus potentially as well, which is just even more backup since we get to keep our back row and have the Zeus as a last resort instead of our active out to Zombie World. There's a few notes I have to mention about this specific setup. This is great if your opponent is already very low on resources, especially in the late game when you already have some banished birds in rotation and you can outplay them on their turn. However, I don't recommend this setup if they do still have a lot of resource access. Also, do not use this setup if they still have Necro Banshee access. Generally, unless you're playing a dedicated zombie deck, our opponent will only be on one zombie world and one Banshee. However, if they have not yet used the Banshee, shuffling Zombie World will only buy you one turn because we just special summoned to clear it, so we have to wait until our opponent's turn to play, and it just gives them a chance to reestablish Zombie World before we can set up to stop it. So use this setup only if you can out-resource your opponent and they don't have Banshee access. We also do run the risk of them hard drawing the zombie world again with this after it's been shuffled away. So this one, while the reward can be much higher since we're keeping more access to our own resources, is more risky. Keep Promenade Thrush in mind because she is going to come back later in this video. Our third method for adding Zombie World is pretty simple and has the same setup as Promenade Thrush. However, instead of overlaying into her, we are going to link off into a Knightmare Phoenix instead. The pros of this being that linking off our tiny birds will actually banish them instead of landing in the grave, and this actually fully destroys the zombie world. The con to this is that you do require an additional card to discard, which can eat into your follow-up plays, and you don't get the Zeus access that Thrush can potentially offer you. Alright, so that's 3 ways we can out a zombie world. Let's talk skill drain. So, skill drain is rough. None of our birdies can do their thing, but I'm going to talk about 2 means of outing it. The first is fairly simple. We can use Unexplored Winds to send it away for a tribute summon. It isn't overly consistent, but using the field spell, we can set up with 1 bird on field, then use our game mechanic normal summon to tribute summon a bigger bird via winds, or at least try to spam birds onto the field with the hope of having enough of a field presence to perform the tribute summon eventually. Like I said, none of these are quite as ideal as a good old feather duster, but weird lines like this are always important to know. Something we can do that will lead into our second out for skill drain is actually to use Advent of Adventure to force resolve our small birds. So consider we need to grab M-Pen to use for the tribute summon. We can normal summon Eaglin via map, activate his trigger effect. Then on Chainlink 2, we can use Advent of Adventure. This will give us another bird in hand, but more importantly, this will move Eaglin off the field so that when he resolves, he is no longer under skill drain. Now we can normal summon the small bird we searched off Advent at the resolution of Eaglin. Now do not activate the effect here, we can save it for later in the turn. Then, using our game mechanic normal summon, send that small bird and the skill drain for the M-Pen via winds. Double bonus, since we didn't use the second small bird's effect, we can recover it, then summon it off M-Pen now that we're not under skill drain anymore, and then get its effect. Now, our second out for skill drain has the same setup as one of our outs for Zombie World with the addition of needing Advent of Adventure. I'm sure you can piece it together from here. In fact, pause the video and comment below if you figured it out. I'll give you a moment. Alrighty, so what we're going to do is follow our line to set up Promenade Thrush. Now, it is very important that we don't activate any effects on field or the banished recover effect. Because in our previous example, we were under Zombie World, the banished recovery effect couldn't activate, but in this case it can. And if you are using an automated simulator, you have to decline to use all trigger effects in this process because both the small birds on field and their banished recovery effects will both lock you out of special summons. So get our materials on field, make Thrush, activate her effect targeting skill drain. Now she's negated on field. See where I'm going with this? Let's chain Advent of Adventure. Because she's a winged beast, we can banish her, grab a bird for follow-up, then she's banished when her effect would resolve, so it's no longer under skill drain, clearing that skill drain. Just an important note that I want to mention. Under Zombie World specifically, because our birds are treated as zombies on field, we cannot banish them for cost with Advent. We can only banish them from our hand where they are still considered winged beasts. Alright, so let's talk about the last major floodgate and the hardest one to out without dedicated spell trap removal. There can only be one. Oof, this one is rough. So, I've already added the copy of Knightmare Phoenix into my extra deck since it can be made under There Can Only Be One, and unfortunately, all our other extra deck plays cannot be done because every line goes from at least one same type to another same type. I won't go over the line to make Knightmare Phoenix again because it is functionally identical to outing Zombie World with it, but just remember to not use any of your banished recovery effects in the process. The other, much more roundabout way to do this involves, you guessed it, unexplored wins again. Unfortunately, this isn't the most reliable method, but again, it is worth being aware of. If you can bait out an attack on a small attack position bird and manage to keep a hand trap or another small bird set, you can go into your turn and tribute summon for your M-Pen using the face down bird, or hand trap, and the opponent's TCBOO. Now, here's where this can be a bit more reliable and actually catch your opponent off guard. Magnificent Map's effect to normal summon in response to your opponent's normal summon is not limited to our level 1 Floowandereeze monsters, but works with any Floowandereeze monster. This means that if you have only a set bird or a face-up hand trap, DD Crow excluded, and your opponent normal summons, you can actually tribute summon M-Pen, or a Snowl if you're playing him, though I'm not the biggest fan, using the set monster or hand trap and their TCBOO. Keep in mind, if you tribute using a set level 1 Floowandereeze, it will go to graveyard since it left the field face down, and thus won't be recoverable by its effect unless you're under a D-shifter. This requires a bit of playing into by your opponent, so it's not the most reliable, but still, like I said early on, knowing these weird corner cases is a big part of winning war. So those are a few ways that you can deal with some of the major floodgates that are around that really hurt the deck. Again, all of this is meant to address really going into a game 1 situation where you don't have anything from the sideboard in and how you can deal with them with just the vanilla deck. Obviously, the ideal plan is use your side deck. I also really just want to close out this video by mentioning not to forget that you do have that extra deck. You won't use it in most games, but sometimes you just need to punch in with 5,300 points of damage to close out a game on an open field. Or you can make a Zeus that can control an endgame while both you and your opponent are very down on resources. While it is rarely used, it is a resource you have access to and you shouldn't forget about it. Additionally, knowing these lines can also help out with other weird corner cases you may find yourself in. As always, don't forget to leave this video a like if you learned something, and feel free to drop any questions in the comments, and if it's something big enough or enough people are asking, it might get a whole video about it. We've actually had a bunch of requests for taking on Despia, so down the pipeline I'll get some replay commentaries going that should help out with that. So make sure you're subbed to the channel to see them first, and I'll catch you all later.